Hey guys, it's Ray here. Welcome to Interrupting Sports, the show devoted to inspiring positive change. This is Season 1, Episode 4, and today I'm excited to talk to you all about where hockey stands on diversity and inclusion. Do you guys ever think, why me? Why, of all people on this earth, you are presented with your unique life circumstances? I always wondered why I was always the only black kid. Whether it was in school, whether it was playing hockey, I always took a moment to think about why me? It's not that it bothered me. You'll remember from episode 1 where I revealed that I was actually very comfortable being the only black girl on my team. So it didn't bother me. I just didn't understand why me and only me. So I began to, think about what are the reasons that can explain this. Was it that I was just very unique and I had a unique interest where no other black kids wanted to be where I was, so no other black kids around me wanted to be hockey players? Was it that I was extremely fortunate because my parents were well off and I had two loving parents who supported my dreams and my aspirations being an athlete? Or was it luck of the draw? Was I just lucky to be me in that position? And over the years, I've realized that it's honestly all of the above. It's a combination of me having a unique interest, being very fortunate, and also being very lucky. As I wrapped my head around this idea of being the only black kid, it really inspired me to look into where hockey in the city of Toronto, where do we stand as a whole on BIPOC representation in hockey? So that's what we're going to be exploring today. Now let's look at where hockey stands on EDI today as a sport. So I looked into the racial incidences that have taken place in the NHL over the past couple of years, and what stuck out to me are a few that I'll name here. I remember 2011 where a fan threw a banana at Wayne Simmons. Later on, we can see in 2018, Devontae Smith-Pelly was taunted with chants of basketball as he was in the penalty box. And more recently, Akeem Aliu revealed that his former coach used a racial slur towards him because he didn't like his taste in music. So that's just naming a few that I feel many people may have heard some rumors of or read some things about, and I thought that would be relatable. But that's just scratching the surface here. The point that we're really trying to get across here is not simply the fact that, okay, there are racial incidences in the NHL, and that's obviously a problem, but it's more than that. It's about the voice of these individuals that make up the BIPOC community in the NHL not being heard. So this brings up the conversation of the development of the Hockey Diversity Alliance, the HDA. So that was developed most recently, and the idea was this organization was founded by BIPOC NHL players, including Akeem Aliu, who's a forefront of that, and players like Evander Kane. And the goal for them was to eradicate systemic racism and intolerance in hockey. However, everyone has heard, and if you haven't, then you'll hear it now, that after several months of their establishment, they split with the NHL rather soon. And so that just goes to show right there that clearly the league isn't listening to these individuals, that as soon as you have the establishment of such a great organization with a great purpose, that they want to part ways and they don't want anything really to do with you at the moment. And Akeem Aliu did speak on this. Akeem said that the HGA wanted to do something now and not eventually. And I do understand his point in that large organizations, they move slowly in the sense of change. They are all talk when it comes to change, and though they do bring about change, it comes at a rate that's not quick enough for these individuals. They want to have an impact today. But something that's even more impactful that Akeem addressed during this split with the NHL is when he noted that it boggles his mind that the NHL can claim that hockey, quote unquote, is for everyone. And I agree with him in the sense that how can you argue that hockey is for everyone while only 5.7% of the league is made up of BIPOC individuals? 96% of your league are white males, which isn't a problem unless you're stating the fact that hockey is for everyone, because really that goes to show that 5.7% shows right there that hockey is clearly not for everyone. So we're clearly seeing a lack of representation in hockey. And the problem with this lack of representation, especially at the professional level, is that it's this that prevents the next generation of young Black girls and Black boys of dreaming to be hockey players. Representation starts at the top. Without representation at the top, you don't have inspiration from the bottom. Don't believe me? Just ask yourself how many young Black girls and Black boys dreamt of being president of the United States after Obama was elected compared to before that. That is my point. My point is you have to see players like Akeem, like Evander Kane, like Nazem Kadri fighting to be heard and to be represented by the league in order for them not only to succeed in the league, but for their successors to do so as well. And seeing that success and that accomplishment is what inspires more to follow. So when we're talking about this lack of representation in the league, we're talking about this because it's directly related to why I'm the only Black girl on my hockey team and why someone else is the only Black kid on theirs. That's why we're talking about this, because it's extremely relevant and it all starts at the top. No one's at the top. And because no one's at the top, no one's coming in from the bottom, from the grassroots programs, from minor hockey, because they don't see anybody there. There's no representation. So all we're doing here is we're tying this lack of representation back to having that poor representation as a whole in the league, and that being a problem for us being heard as a collective community. Before diving into this lack of representation in hockey and how that ties to being that only Black girl on the hockey team, I wanted to take a moment to mention the newsletter. So I just wanted to call it out here and invite you guys to subscribe to our newsletter on interruptingsports.com. That's our website. And that'll allow you guys to stay up to date on all things interrupting sports. So you receive the latest podcast episodes, news, and blog posts right to your inbox. So head to our website and scroll down to the footer and enter your name and email and subscribe now. So when exploring this topic and really thinking about being that only Black girl on the hockey team, I began to do research because I boggled my mind as to this 5.7% of BIPOC individuals making up the NHL. And I really wanted to understand how that all came to be, because it has to be more than the mindset that, you hear this is a white man's game. And yeah, it has been for a long time, but it's still shocking to me that that number and that percentage is so low. So I wanted to know there has to be more to it than representation. There has to be something else tied to representation. And there is. It's accessibility. So I did some research and I came across a survey that took place in 2019. So Flipguide and Scotiabank did a report on the real cost of hockey. So they took over 1,000 North American hockey parents as their sample, and they surveyed them on the cost of hockey. So I'm about to shock you guys with a few numbers here. And for those who are hockey parents, you're about to be reassured in your spending. Did you know that nearly 60% of hockey parents spend more than $5,000 per year to fund their kid in hockey? And 41% of hockey parents spend between $5,000 and $10,000 a year. As well, 16% spend upwards of $10,000 a year on all hockey related expenditures. So when we're talking about funding your kid to play hockey, we're talking about league fees, we're talking about travel, we're talking about training camps, we're talking about equipment, all of it. So you're looking at spending around 5 to 10 grand a year on one kid playing hockey. That is absolutely ridiculous. So that's the first thing in itself, that hockey is expensive. But I went deeper because I said, okay, this is expensive, but how does this tie to the BIPOC community? So what I did was I looked at specifically at the city of Toronto, and what I did was I looked at Black communities and neighborhoods where the Black population tends to reside, and I looked at their income level because I wanted to see if there was an association or relationship with these numbers and how that relates to accessibility. So according to the last census in 2016, there's a high concentration of Black individuals in North York and Etobicoke areas. So what's important about that to note is that that is also the area where the highest average income bracket is up to $70,000 a year. So you're telling me that for Black parents in these areas, North York and Etobicoke areas, to fund their kids' hockey careers, they're going to need to make major life sacrifices, such as taking on more debt, working another job, maybe even reducing other household budgets, such as groceries and entertainment, to fund their kid in hockey because they're making $70,000 a year on the upper end, on average, and hockey's costing up to $10,000 a year if they're spending excessively on league fees, travel, camps, and equipment, which why wouldn't they be when they're trying to invest in their kids' future? Because many of these parents believe that sports, and especially hockey, is a way for their kids to reach post-secondary education. So they'll do it through sports. So they'll be investing their kid right now for the future. So tell me right now, how are you supposed to afford to support your kid properly with these fees, making this money? It doesn't add up, and it's not right. So you really have to look at what is the problem here. Is the problem that we're not making enough money? We as collectively? Life is more expensive? Hockey is too expensive? What is the problem here? So our implication that we really need to think about is the fact that you cannot expect that 5.7% of BIPOC individuals making up the NHL population to rise if at the minor hockey level that number isn't rising. Now, that number can't rise if life is getting more expensive, hockey is getting more expensive, and more resources are needed to dedicate to them, while parents are making the same amount of money, and while that money is on the lower income bracket of the city of Toronto. So support is needed here. This is where things like the HDA coming in and making their difference by advocating for these grassroots programs. That is what's absolutely key here. So what's the takeaway from this? I've thrown a lot of numbers at you guys. 5.7% NHL population is made up of BIPOC individuals. I've also expressed the fact that 16% of the 1,000 hockey parents that were surveyed spend upwards of $10,000 a year on hockey-related expenditures. Lots of numbers thrown at you. So what is the takeaway here? Well, the NHL prides itself by saying hockey is for everyone. I'll tell you right now, hockey is not for everyone. It should be for everyone, and it can be for everyone, but as it stands, right now, hockey is not for everyone. So what do we do? What do we do now? We've identified a few things here. We've identified that we have an accessibility problem. Hockey is too expensive. And who is it too expensive for? It's too expensive for the parents that are members of these BIPOC communities, because they're the ones who reside in the areas of the city where they're on average lower income brackets. We've also identified that there's a representation problem. There is not enough professional hockey players that are members of the BIPOC community. It is very, very male dominant on the white Republican side, which means that young Black girls and young Black boys aren't seeing their people represented as they should in the league, which is deterring them away from proceeding down a path where they want to become a successful hockey player, and they look to other sports. And we're not saying don't look to other sports, but we're saying we shouldn't deny them of dreaming to be a successful hockey player. And by no means should the reason a kid is not able to play hockey be because it is too expensive. There's no reason for that to occur. And that is the problem. So we have an accessibility problem and a representation problem, but it's understanding that these two go hand in hand. Because without accessibility, we will never have true representation. So we have to follow the steps of the HDA, the Hockey Diversity Alliance, and improve accessibility in minor hockey at the grassroots programs, because that is what will lead future generations of BIPOC children aspiring to be hockey players. And we can begin that, each and every one of us, today. We can look at how in our own communities we can foster hockey programs and maybe support our local YMCAs and community centers and volunteer to coach, volunteer to train, and to teach others hockey skills in these communities so that we can develop leagues and develop teams so that they have somewhere to play. And then the love for the game only grows from there. All right, guys, so I've left you with a lot today, but I just want you to take away the point that we can do better to improve hockey and to make sure we're all represented in the sport. And how we can do that is cultivating that appreciation for sport and appreciation for hockey across all BIPOC communities and all communities by improving access to sport. So with that brings us to the end of today's episode. So I want to thank you guys for taking the time to tune in. Please show some love to your favorite podcast by following us on Instagram at Interrupting Sports. I'll leave you guys today the same way I do every week. Remember to be the person today that you want to be tomorrow. Thanks, guys, and see you next week.